Hi friends, Tiffany here. Welcome to my quilting life. Have you ever wondered what it would be like to make just one block and make a quilt? Well, I'm not talking about just like a 5 across by 6 down of one block and making a quilt. No, 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 no. I am talking about just one quilt block and one giant quilt. Well, have you ever wondered? Well, I got you today because in today's video, I'm going to take one block and make one giant quilt. That's right. Yeah, I'm going to do it. So, what do you need for today's project? You need 12 fat quarters and you need 1.5 yards of background. And you're not going to just get one project from today's video. Nope. You're going to get 2 projects from today's video. So you're going to get your one giant quilt block quilt, and then you're going to get a second project. That's it. Yep, that's what we're going to do today. One giant quilt block. Here we go. In today's video, what you're going to need for the quilt is a 12-piece fat quarter bundle. Now, mine is not a matched bundle from the store where they come with all the colors from a line. Mine is actually a homemade bundle from my own stash. So there's just a bunch of random pieces in here. Some I probably don't even know the name to. So I just went through the fat quarters and I decided to make my own fat quarter bundle. And this is my lovely bundle that I have made for today's quilt. Look at that. So it is tan, taupe, and a darkish gray and black kind of deal going on here. So now I need some background fabric. So 12 fat quarters and 1.5 yards of a background fabric. Now I'm using black. It's not the same black that's in here, so it should stand out in the quilt. So 1.5 yards of a background and 12 fat quarters. Now I just need to press them. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and move my background out of the way. We will cut that in a minute. We're going to start with our fat quarters. As you saw when I was laying them out, all fat quarters from every company are not created equal. So some could be 18.25 by 22.5. Some could be only 17.75 because, you know, the company wants to cheat you out or it just ends up happening that way, by 21. Some are exactly 18 by 23 because it's a different, you know, kind of fabric. And when it's folded in half, you get 23 inches if it's half, you know. So remember that when you're choosing your fat quarters and you're cutting and pressing everything and laying it out, that not all fat quarters are created equal. So we are going to line them up, the ones we choose for the directions you're going to follow right now. We're going to line them up so that the pieces, at least one side and the selvage, are close to each other. That way we know we have an equal layout. The first step is we are going to choose 8 of our fat quarters. We're going to take 8 of them. These ones are going to be very big cuts. So we want 8 that will be nicely pronounced. So I'm going to grab 8 of these. So there's 2. I'm just going to stack them so I could see what 8 I'm choosing. This one's kind of big, so we'll choose this one because it's a big print. So that's 3. I definitely want this one as one of my big focus prints, so that's 4. Let's see. I'm going to make this one of my focus prints, so that will make 5. And then let's do one of these, that's 6. Let's do this one, 7, and we need one more for my number 8, and I will not use that one. Let's use, I'm skipping things here. Look at that. Let's use this one. That should be an equal amount of dark and light for me. All right, so right now I'm just going to stack these extra 4 out of the way. Oops. Trying to keep them to stay nice, you know. All right, so I'm going to put all these out of the way for a moment. And we're going to grab our 8. And what I'm going to do is, you can stack in 2 piles of 4. You can do them in piles of 2 if you want. But look at this. Look at the difference between the selvage right here on this one. Let me just straighten it. And this one. Look how much extra there is there. So this is why, and this one's a lot wider too. Look at that. This is why I'm going to line them up on the selvage. So I'm going to move them out of the way and do 2 at a, or 1, 2 at a time, and then lay them on top. So I'm going to go ahead and line these 2 up right here. And I can see that this line is kind of straight over there on that side. So I know that I'm going to cut the equal amount. And then I'm going to go to these 2 right here. I'm going to place them on top. So I'm just going to straighten them out. I'm going to see if this line is lined up on this side as best as possible. And then I'm going to line those selvages up just like this. So right here, there's 4 of them. So let me stack a second stack of 4. I'm going to go ahead and line these 2 up. Again, I'm just matching one side and the selvage because your selvage is your straightest part on these fat quarters. So there's 2. And then I'm going to line the next 2 up and place them on top. All right. I got that side pretty much lined up where I could see it. Come down. And that's my straightest point right there, is the selvage. So I'm going to kind of shuffle these to the side, and we're going to start with our first stack of 4. Normally I would cut all 8 at the same time, but I'm just going to show you that, you can cut 4 at a time to make it easier. So we're going to grab a long ruler for this, a long ruler. And I am going to, if you can see, let me just move these guys out of the way, just so that you can see. I'm going to line that selvage up because I know that's my straightest part. I'm going to line it up with a line on my ruler. And the first thing I'm going to do is lay my ruler to where I can come over here and fold these back and see that I am getting all 4 layers. Once I know I'm getting all 4 layers, I'm going to go ahead and make my first cut. And yes, I'm cutting kind of backwards. And then my first cut is going to be an 8.5 inch strip. So my ruler itself is 8.5 inches. So if you were lining yours up on a line on your cutting mat, which would be right there, you would come over 8.5 inches on your cutting mat. I have an 8.5 inch ruler, so I'm going to go ahead now and cut 8.5 inches. Slide it over, reline that ruler up, what's left on the fabric. We're going to line it up right here at the end. And I'm going to cut a second 8.5, and it looks to be catching all the fabrics behind there. And I'm going to make sure up here that it's right on there, and it is, and it is. Everything looks good. So there are my 8.5 inch strips, and there is my leftover. So you can see, look at how much skinnier, how much more. This one has a lot. This one barely has any. You can see that all the fabrics are all different when you get fat quarters. So don't be afraid. There's plenty of room for these cuts with these fat quarters. Okay, so I'm going to set those aside. Actually, we'll just go ahead and do it right here, right now. Take one stack of the 4, and we're going to cut off all the selvages now. So I'm going to line up the line on the ruler with my nice straight edge right here and right here. I'm going to make sure that I'm getting all the selvages. Some of these are big ones. So make sure I'm getting all of them. And yes, I am. I'm going to line this up on a line, this up on a line. I'm going to go ahead and make my cut. Now I'm going to come over. Where is it? We're going to look for 16 and a half. 16 and a half. So 13, 14, 15, 16, and there is my half. And since my ruler is 8.5, I'm just going to line it up right here on 16 and a half, and both my top and bottom are exactly lined up. And you probably can't see that because it's really hard to see through this ruler. Okay? All right. While we're right here, don't move that piece. We're going to move this out of the way. You should be able to, after you get that 16 and a half inch, you should be able to come over with the last of this and get 4.5 inches. If your fabric is the length that's supposed to be, let's see, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, all 4. 4.5 inches. So you got a 16 and a half by 8.5 and a 4.5 inch by 8.5 inch piece. So I'm going to set the 4.5 one aside, and I'm going to set my 8.5 inch ones aside in their pile. And now I'm going to take this next set from the same fat quarters right here. And we're going to go do that same thing where we cut the selvage off. So I'm going to line the ruler line. So those are lined up nicely. Perfect, perfect. Make sure we got all the selvages. Some are wider than others, but I got them all. If they weren't so wide, then I'd have a little bit extra on that end. All right, so I got all of those, but now we're going to cut 8.5 inches. So I'm leaving my ruler right here because, again, my ruler is 8.5 inches, and I'm going to cut an 8.5 inch square. I'm going to line this up, and I'm going to go ahead again and cut an 8.5 inch square. Right there. And what's left over is not 4.5. I don't think. Nope, it wasn't 4.5 left over on my second cut. So I'm going to move that to a totally different pile because that's just scraps. So now I have 8.5 inch squares, and then I have the 4 8.5 by 16.5. So let's cut the other 4 in the same cuts. So my other 4 are lined up. I'm just going to stick them nicely right here in front of you. Move these rulers out of the way and move my cut pieces out of the way so that I don't get those. I'm going to go ahead now and make sure that my ruler is cutting off every single edge right here. And it looks to be catching all of them right there. I'm lining the selvage up on a line on my ruler. Just like this. I know that's the straightest part right there. And I'm catching all the layers all the way down. So I'm going to go ahead and make that cut. Fix that little end right there because I'm cutting on the wrong side. And I got all 4. I always like to check to make sure I got the full length of all 4. Or 8 if you're cutting 8. Now I'm going to go ahead and cut an 8.5 inch strip. So my ruler is staying here. Cut 8.5. Slide it out of the way. And then cut another 8.5 inch strip. Just like this. And you should have plenty. Again, plenty left over. All right. So I'm going to take this one right now and this one and turn it. I'm going to go ahead and cut the selvage off. Just going to turn the ruler this way. Lining up this and this right here, top and bottom. Making sure I'm getting all these selvages. Man, that one's a big one. There. Yep, yep, yep. Ooh, we can slide it back just a little. Right there. All right, so I got all the selvages. Now I'm going to come down 16.5 inches. Again, 16.5 inches. So in total, we're cutting out 8 16.5 inch rectangles. And then we're cutting out 16 Now you can see, look at that fat quarter was too short to get our 4.5 off of there. So that's just going to go in my scrap pile. And I'm going to go ahead and cut 4.5 off of what's left. And don't worry, we have enough fat quarters for all these cuts. So I'm put this 3 pieces in my extra 4.5 by 8.5 inch pile. And now I have a total of 8.5 by 16.5 inch pieces. So I have a total of 8 of those. That is what we need. 8. Those are completely done. We need a total of 20 cuts that are 8.5 inch squares. So I'm going to go ahead now and cut from here. Just going to line. I don't know why I'm using that one. That one's for my little 4.5s. Go ahead, line this up, cut all those selvages at the same exact time. And then I come over to 8.5 right here. Just going to line this up on the edge of my fabric that I just cut. So there's 8.5. I'm going to do it one more time. And again, I won't have 4.5 left over from this. So those go in my extra scrap pile. All right, so now I have 16, and now I need to make some more to make 20. So there's 16 of those. Here are my 4 pieces that I have left over. I'm going to go ahead and line these up by their selvages. This one seems to be a very large piece. I'm just going to lay that right there. And this right here. Just going to smooth them out. Put these 2 together and then smooth these 2 out. This. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and line the selvage up on the line on the ruler. Check to see if I got all the edges, which I'm pretty sure I did. Make my first cut. I'm going to count off 4 of these just to make sure I got all 4 because I couldn't see and I'm kind of working a little blind. And yes, I did, all 4. I'm going to cut an 8.5 inch strip, just like that. And technically we need 20 of these, but we're going to trim some down because I don't want them all to be that size. All right, so I'm going to slide this over just a little. I'm going to go ahead and trim off the selvage on these. I'm going to cut 8.5 inches because I'm trying to blend all the colors. All right, there's 8.5. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4. We're going to go ahead and choose 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And then we're going to cut again off of here. All right. Where am I at? I got 12. So now I have 2 of each. 1 of each. 2 of each. Where am I at? Okay, I have 2 from that pile. And then this is 1 pile. I need 20 total. Those are the same. And these are the same. So I'm going to pull out 20 of them. Those are the same. In just a second. Just going to set those aside because I'm going to pull out 20. I don't think I'm going to get 4.5 from this because, again, not all fat quarters are created equal, and those are not. Some of them are, but we'll pull from that. So now we're going to go ahead and cut another 8.5 inch strip. 8.5 inch strip. Just like this. Set these in my string pile. I'm going to go ahead now line this up just like this. And we're going to do 2 4.5-inch cuts. 1, 2, and 3. Actually, let's do 3 from here, because I'm going to cut some from the other ones to have a blend of color. There we go. Keeping that right there. We want that to stay. All right, so got all these. We're going to choose out 20 of these. So I got one of those. I got one of each of these. One of each of those. And one of each of those. Let's see how many we have. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. We're going to do 13. 14. 15. 16. 17. 18. Let's see. Let's choose dark. 19, and choose one more. We'll do this one, 20. Okay, so now the last of these, I'm going to stack them back up here. I hope I'm not confusing anybody here, but I'm going to go ahead, now that they're stacked up and they're equal with each other, I'm going to go ahead and cut 4.5 inches off of one side. The other side will go with my scraps. All right, so there's my 4.5 pile. All right, that goes in my scrap pile. And then we're going to go ahead and cut. We got 8.5 inches left here. We are going to cut 4.5. Actually, let's see if I have it this way. Hold on. Oh, yeah, we do. Let's go 4.5. Yeah, it doesn't matter which way. By 6.5. So we're going to go to 6.5. I only need 4 of them. 4.5 by 6.5. Right here. That's 6.5. So we're going to cut that right there. Cut down that way. All right, so I have 4 4.5 by 6.5 inch pieces. And now we're going to cut this down 2.5. Okay. And then I'm going to cut off 4.5. So I have 1, 2, 3, and 4, right, of those. So that's my scrap. We're going to count out 24 of these. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, and that's the straight edge. We'll get 24 because this one is pretty much 4.5. I'm all over the place, and I'm very sorry about that. 24 of those. Okay, there is 8 16.5 by 8.5 inch. Then there is a total of 20 right here, 8.5 by 8.5 inch squares. So there's 20 of those. Then there is 24 4.5 by 8.5 inch pieces. Okay, now let's just stack that there. And then there is a total of 4 sets here of a 6.5 by 4.5 and a 2.5 by, go right there, a 2.5 by 4.5. So a 4.5 by 6.5 and a 4.5 by 2.5. And there's 4 corners worth. So there's 1, and then here's a second, 3 and 4. So 4 6.5 by 4.5 and 4 2.5 by 4.5. One more time. There is 8 16.5 by 8.5. There is 20 8.5 by 8.5 inch squares. There is 24 4.5 by 8.5 inch rectangles. There is 4 6.5 by 4.5 inch rectangles and 4 2.5 by 4.5 inch rectangles. That way we have a match of fabric on each corner. So I'm just making sure that those are my matched ones right there. So those are going to get set aside. And all this will get set aside because we need to cut out our background yardage now. Now, from my background, I pressed it, but then I rolled it up. Now it's a disaster. Go ahead, and it's a 1.5 yards. There should be plenty of fabric. Look how much black picks up. My average sewing room mess right here. All right, so I'm going to line these up. Go ahead and straighten the edge. Now, this one's a little bit harder for me to see because it is black fabric with black lines on my ruler. We're going to go ahead and hope that this is... I always open it up like this and see, oh, hey, I got the whole way. And if there's a fold, then it goes the whole way from selvage to selvage. We're going to start with 1, 2 8.5 inch strips, 3, 4 8.5 inch strips. We need 4 8.5 inch strips. Then we need 5 2.5 inch strips. So I cut 2 at a time because I had mine folded in half. So I'm going to cut 5 2.5 inch strips. So here's 2, 4, and open this up. And I gave you extra yardage just in case you made a wrong cut. And here's my 5th right here. And then we have about 6.5 inches left. I just over measure purposely for this kind of stuff. All right, so here's my 5 2.5 inch by width of fabric strips. I'm going to set those aside because those are for border. And now we have our 4 8.5 inch width of fabric strips. So I'm just going to stack them right here, just like this. I'm going to go ahead now and I'm going to cut off the whole entire selvage from end to end, just like this. Get rid of that selvage on both of these. Okay, and then I'm going to cut 16 total 8.5 inch squares. So we got 8 here. 4 and 4 is 8. Okay, and then there is 16. All right, so on the back side of all the fabric, since I'm using a solid, the back side, we are going to draw a line from corner to corner. And since I am using a black, I'm going to go ahead and take a white chalk pencil. I'm going to line it up right here, and I'm going to draw my line from corner to corner, just like this, because we're going to be sewing on that line. So on the back side of all of my pieces, I'm going to go ahead and draw a line on all 16 of my 8.5 inch background squares. I have drawn a line on the back side of all 16 of my background squares. Now, because I don't want to waste fabric and we're going to make a bonus project here, I'm going to go ahead and I should have done this while it was there, but I just did it now. I'm going to go ahead now and draw another line a 1/2 inch away from that first line. It doesn't matter what side you're drawing it on. I'm just drawing them all on the same exact side. So a 1/2 inch away. Just draw another line. Now that all of our lines are drawn, it's time to start sewing. So I'm going to go ahead now and I'm going to keep all of these pieces here, and I'm going to grab my 16.5 by 8.5 inch rectangles and bring those over here, and we are going to make giant flying geese units. So let me put some of this out of the way and clean up, and we'll get to start sewing. All right, what we're going to do is I'm going to take one of these and I'm going to stick the drawn line, that's the corner to corner one, right here on this one side, just like this. So from my corner to the middle, because we're making giant flying geese. Now for you, it'd be the opposite way. I'm just doing it where it's facing me. I'm going to sew on my corner to corner line, and then I'm going to come back and sew on my extra line a 1/2 inch away. Then we're going to cut that away and have this. Then we're going to take the other one. We're going to make sure that the 1/2 inch line that we made is facing the outer way. We're going to put that corner to corner line from corner to corner. Obviously, this will be pressed back. And then we're going to sew on that line and come back and sew that second line. And then when we fold it back, we will have a giant flying geese unit. Okay, so that's what we're going to do with all of these. I chain piece, so I'm going to go ahead and do all of them on this side first. And then I'll come back after cutting the excess away. Then I'll come back and do the opposite side. So let's get sewing. All right, now that we're at the machine, remember we're sewing on both the lines that we have drawn. We're going to go ahead and sew our first line, which is the one we want. So on that line, or a hair to the cutoff side of the line. Either way. And then we come back and do the other line. All right, so when we open this up, you're going to see we have half on this side, and then this side is already sewn for later when we go to trim it off. All right, so I'm going to go ahead now and sew the rest of them. And I chain piece these through. Make sure it's lined up. You could throw a pin in it if you wanted to. Pin on each side right here to hold it in place. I just hold it with my hands really nicely. So I sew like this, and then I'll put the other one on here, making sure it's lined up. That looks good. Now that they're all sewn, I'm going to take them over and I'm going to cut in between both those sewn lines. So a 1/4 inch away from this line and a 1/4 inch in from this line. So right down the center. I'm going to go ahead and cut all those off, and then I'm going to press my pieces back like this. And if you want, while you're at the iron, you could always go ahead and press your 1/2 square triangle extras as well to get those already ready. All right, now that I have all these units put on, we're going to do the opposite side. So what I'm going to do is, here's my drawn line, right? You can see my line on there. We're going to go ahead and turn this one to where my line comes from the center, which is where this black is. It's going to cross over that black, and it's going to come over right here and come out this bottom corner. So now the unit is going this way. I'm going to make sure my 1/2 inch away line is on this outer side, because this is the piece we want to cut off. I'm going to go ahead now and sew from this corner down to that corner. So again, I'm just going to grab another piece, take one of these, making sure that I have it crossing up here and lined up down in this corner, just like this, making sure my 1/2 inch away drawn line is on this outer side. Everything should line right up. It's exactly the same size corner piece. And if you're curious, I actually pressed all of these towards the big unit. So everything's pressed under towards this. All right, again, line this one up. Get that lined up, get that lined up, and that lined up. There we go. Okay, now that they're all sewn, I'm going to go ahead and cut in between the center of these two lines, giving myself a giant flying geese on one side. And if you did them all correctly, you should have a nice straight line across the top, and you should have a smidgen more than a 1/4 inch right here at the corner if you're using your 1/4 inch seam correctly. And then you're also going to have your back pieces that are 1/2 square triangles. So I'm going to go ahead, cut these apart, press them, and we'll move on to the next step. The next step is to put your flying geese into pairs like this. So I want these two together. And then the next one would be this one and this one together, and so on and so forth. Just put the two you want together so that we can sew these. So I'm going to go ahead and have my darker one on the top and my lighter one on the bottom so that I can see the crossover right here for my flying geese. They should be exactly the same size and line right up just like this. And I'm going to go ahead now and sew my 1/4 inch seam. I'm going to watch out for my point where those two cross, because I don't want to lose my point. And I could see it if it was pressed this way, but I kind of pressed everything towards the inner side instead of towards the black. But that's okay. If I want to hold it back, I can do this and just repress that, or I can just keep at my 1/4 inch seam as to not lose my point. So let's see if I kept my point or not. It's right there on the edge, so you can see I mostly have a point. It's there. So I'm going to go ahead and sew the next unit. Again, I'm putting my lighter one on this side and my darker one on the top. It doesn't matter for you, just put them in pairs. I'm going to line them up. If you want to pin, you can. Again, I never do. Go ahead. Sew a 1/4 inch seam I'm just watching for that point, making sure that everything stays lined up. I do find that these giant flying geese are a little bit easier. There's a perfect point right there. These giant flying geese are a little bit easier to manage than the smaller flying geese units. All right, so these two are going to go together. Since this is scrappy and I don't have organized fabrics, mine, it doesn't matter how I lay mine out when it comes to the color, as long as no two colors are touching when I start putting it together. Okay, let's check this point. Oh, look at that. Perfect. Right there at the tip is just where I want it. And one more. So this gives us 4 flying geese double unit. All right, I'm going to line them up. They're exactly the same size. If you press everything nicely, you can press whatever way you want, by the way, on this. It's not going to matter because nothing really lines up. So the seams are, I mean, they do nest, but they're not perfect, no matter which way you put it together. I would have had to pre-go through everything to make sure that that was correct. And I have a beautiful point right there. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and press all these up towards this piece because it kind of wants to go that way for bulk purposes on its own. I've gone ahead now and put my pieces on my design wall, or if you have a floor, use that. We're going to fill this section, that, and that with squares. So let me go ahead and do that with the 8.5-inch squares. So I got 4 in the middle. Let's do the sides. And now I have filled in all the sections. Now I didn't have enough pieces to take my dark and run it all the way through. I did not do that on purpose, but I figured it would be easier, so instead of it making it look a little off, so I ran it through. You don't have to do that because, as you notice, I don't have any really dark pieces up here, like right here. So I was kind of shy one piece, but that's okay. It doesn't matter. So now that that is filled in, we're going to go ahead and piece these giant 4 patches together and then place them back on the wall. Now that all of our units are sewn together, our 4 patches, our giant 4 patches, we now have a giant quilt block. So what we're going to do is go ahead and sew this to that, and then to that, that, to that, to that. So when I sew this one to this one, I'm going to press the seam towards the 4 patch. And then when I sew these 3, I'm going to press the seam towards the 4 patch. On these 3, I'm going to press towards the 4 patches. That way it has less bulk from the corners right here, here, there, and up there. So let's sew our giant 9 patch together. Now that we have the 3 sections together, it's time to join the sections. So it's the same as any 9 patch. Again, I pressed towards the 4 patches, not towards those centers. I'm going to go ahead now and put this one on top of that one and sew it, and then add that one. So it's the same as any 9 patch. Once you have sewn together your whole entire giant quilt block, it's time to make it into a quilt. So we're going to go ahead now and add some borders. So if you had an accurate 1/4 inch seam and all of your pieces were cut correctly, then this should be 48 1/4 by 48 1/4. So we're going to go ahead now and take those 5 strips. Remember those 5 strips we cut out of our background fabric in the beginning? And we're going to piece them together end to end. I have 1 long strip. I measured it out, and I'm going to go ahead and cut at 48 1/4. So I'm going to cut 2 pieces off of my nice long strip at 48 1/4. 2 pieces at 48 1/4. I have my 2 right here, just the ones that are laying straight at 48 1/4. And now I'm going to cut 2 more pieces off of my leftover piece, and I'm going to cut 2 that are 52 1/4. So 2 pieces off of the leftover at 52 1/4. Once you have 2 48 1/4 and 2 52 1/4, you should only have a little bit left. The reason why we did this is because not all selvage to selvage lengths are the same on all fabrics. So sometimes they could be 44 inches and all you needed to add was a tiny, tiny bit to make one strip have a little bit. Or you can just piece a whole entire long piece with all 5, but you should still have plenty with 5 pieces. So let's put these on our quilt. We're going to start by attaching the 48 1/4 to the 2 sides. So let's attach those. All right, the sides are on. Now to attach the 52 1/4 inch to the top and to the bottom. Okay, now that we have those first borders on, we're going to take those 4.5 by 8.5 inch rectangles, and we're going to have some fun with them. So we're going to place these all around the edge. Let's get to it. So I've gone ahead and only placed them within this distance. So we have these corners right here and all 4 corners. So remember those 6.5 by 4.5 and 2.5 by 4.5 inch pieces? Well, let's lay those out. The 2.5 inch piece is going to go up here facing this direction right here. So it's going to go horizontal right there at the top of the side, and then one is going to go at the bottom of the opposite side, and one is going to go at the top, and one is going to go at the bottom, all on the sides. Then the top and bottom are going to get one of these on each edge. So make sure we're matching them up like this. So again, the 2.5 inch goes at the top of this border on the side and on the opposite side. So it's going to go 2.5 inch, 4.5 by 6, 8.5, 4.5 by 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 8.5, I think, and then a 2.5 by 4.5. So again, this starts with a 2.5 by 4.5, then it goes to the 4.5, 8.5, 4.5, 8.5, 4.5, 8.5, 4.5, 8.5, 4.5, 8.5, 4.5, 8.5, and then a 2.5, 4.5 on the sides. Then the top and bottom up here, right there, you're going to see it's going to start with a 6.5 by 4.5, and then it's going to make its way down with 6 of the 8.5 by 4.5s, and then it's going to end with a 6.5 by 4.5. So hopefully that's easy to understand. I'm going to go ahead and sew all the borders. So I'm just going to make the side sections and then attach those, and then make the top and bottom sections and attach those. Now on the 2 sides that I pieced, I pressed the 2.5-inch piece in towards the unit, and then the rest of them just press whatever. Your top and bottom, you can just press however you want, to the left, to the right. It doesn't really matter, as long as your 2.5-inch piece on the ends of your sides face under, in towards the piece, because when we pressed our border on, I put the border to where I push the seams away from the quilt. That's how I always press a border. I always press it away from the quilt top. So to have those 2 seams up here, right there, nest, right there, where the side and the thing come together, we want to make sure that they're pressed in opposite directions. Now I want to show you how to line these up, because you could mess up the line right here. So I want to show you how to pin your sides on, and your top and your bottom, and get those sewn on. All right, here we have one side. I have some clips, and then I have my border pieces. So like I said, that end we pressed in towards this. So my little 2.5-inch piece can nest right here at this edge. So I'm going to go ahead and nest that and put a clip on it. And then I'm going to come over here to this other side, put these right sides together, and then I'm going to go ahead and nest that one, holding those in place for now. This should be exactly the same size, which is 52.25 inches. Now I'm going to straighten it out, and you can see my seams right here. This is what I wanted to show you to keep it lined up, is my seams are touching the seams. So right here and right there. And my center, if you run your finger down, should land at the center of that. So I'm going to go ahead now and put a clip at each junction to make sure that these stay right there at those seams when I'm sewing it. So I'm going to come over here and do this opposite side. Again, I'm going to line up the edge, obviously, of the border, but I'm also going to make sure that these seams, you can even nest it right here at this edge, and that's how you know it's where it's supposed to be. Again, you can just hold it down because my seams are kind of opposite. Like I said, there was really no pressing matter, just back and forth, it don't matter. And then one right here. So I have that side attached. I'm going to go ahead now and put the opposite side on. So I'm just going to lay this right here, grab my other side. Here is my other side. I'm going to do that same exact thing. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to clip and nest my seam right here at the end. I'm going to clip on it. And then you could even just go ahead and like nest that seam and put a clip there, so on and so forth. But I like to do the 2 ends first so that I know that everything is going to line up in between in case it shifts or adjusts or my seam allowance wasn't absolutely correct. So again, I'm going to lay it flat now as best as I can. I'm going to put a pin or a clip here. That one's lined up, so I'm going to put a clip right here. And I'm going to do the same process when I do the top or the top and bottom. When I put those on, I'm actually going to do the same process, except I'm going to pin from the middle out. And I'll show you when we get to that. So now that they are clipped, I'm going to go ahead and sew those on, and then I'm going to press them away from the center. So I'm going to go ahead and do that real quick. Now I will show you how to center up your top and bottom. And the reason why we are putting the center on first is because these end pieces may be 1/4 inch too big on both sides. It may need to have been 6 1/4 instead of 6 1/2, but it all depends because I made another one and it came out a little bit bigger on one and not on another. So we're going to go ahead and just center this right here. So I'm going to find my center seam, and I'm going to go ahead and lay it right here, and I'm going to draw my finger and say, oh, okay, that matches. And then I'm going to say these match right here. So I'm going to go ahead and put some clips in place because I know that this is lined up right here. This is lined up right here. And this one is lined up right here. Just like this. Now I'm going to make my way over this way because it's easier at the moment to go to this side first. And see, this one lines up exact. So I don't know. I don't know what happens. Some fabric just stretches differently. So I'm going to line that up. And line that up. And put a clip right here on the end. And then I'm going to move to the other side. So I don't know what to tell you. Some of them end up a little bit bigger, but 6.5 should be your cut. Like I said, my previous one had a hangover, so it probably just stretched the fabric a little bit. Put a clip there, and one right here in my end, and then I'm going to flop it over to the other side and clip that one on. Oops, I think I have the wrong sides on there. Let's put it this way. Got to make sure that my end piece is the same as my 2.5-inch piece, see? So that it creates this corner unit. So I'm just going to make sure that those are on the correct side. All right. So now, just going to line this up. Again, those are in the spots they need to be. Put some clips in it. And this is the last step of this quilt. I'm going to go this way first. And see, this one's hanging over 1/4 right there. So somewhere, somehow, this got stretched a little bit, or it was sucked in by the feed dogs and became smaller than it's supposed to be. This one is exactly the same size. So I guess it all depends on how your fabric is being fed into your machine, but it should come out exact at 6.5 for your end cap pieces. All right, so I'm going to go ahead now and sew this last 2 pieces on, and I will meet you back on the design wall. Here's my finished quilt top. Look at that. So it's a giant block, and add some borders, and now it's a giant quilt block. Quilt block quilt. I think it's cute. So it's 60 1/4 inches square. So it should be, your finished quilt top should be 60 1/4 inches on all 4 sides. Doesn't that look amazing? I love the giant quilt block. I think it's about time I make some more giant quilt block quilts. But for now, we got this one, and it looks amazing. So this is just an Echo Star, and it looks fabulous. I love it. Now let's take a look at my other one that I have done. And here is a Christmas-themed one. So it is all Christmas fabrics. Same exact giant block, just with Christmas fabric, so that you can get a general idea of what it would look like if you'd done yours in the holidays. You could also do Halloween fabric. You could also do themed fabric, like, I don't know, just anything you want. But I just wanted to show you the 2 different styles that are created from the giant quilt block, you know, into this wonderful quilt. So this one's exactly the same thing, just different colors and super bright and cheery for the holidays. All right, now for the bonus project. What I have is 16 pieces that are half square triangles that were cut off. I went ahead off camera and cut these down to 7.5. They are very close to 7.5. So it's just a skinny little trim on one or both sides to get these to be 7.5. And then it gets rid of the dog ears on both ends. So when we made our giant flying geese units, we had these extra. Then we had all the little leftover cuts that were not big enough to make 4.5, but we're going to use those. And then the last of what I had from my 1.5 yards, this is what I have. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to cut down my last of my 1.5 inch my last of my 1.5 yards, and then the last of these into 1 3/4 inch strips. And then these are going to be 1 3/4 by 7.5. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this now. I'm just going to straighten up this edge because it kind of got a tiny bit wonky by being moved around. So I'm just going to straighten that out. I just took a sliver off of it. Turn it around, and I'm going to cut it into 1 3/4 inch strips. 1 3/4. And I should get 4 of them. From the last of my yardage. That also depends on how your yardage was cut from the store when you purchased it, but you should be able to get your 2 projects from that exact amount. So that was exactly what was left. So now that I have those cut, these I'm going to go ahead and trim to 7.5. I probably won't get 2 of those out of there. So we're going to trim these to 7.5. Actually, I could probably just stack them all up because they're all pretty darn equal. Those ones I cannot see very well. Let's do these. So I'm going to cut 1 inch off of one end of each of these after they are stacked up. That's plenty for that pile. And I'm also lining up the last cut edge. So that way I don't have to make that many cuts. So let's go to 7.5 here. Just like this. Trim that off. That go over my 1 inch scraps. And then this, trim to 7.5. Just like that. And now we're just going to go ahead, since I stacked them all nicely, and cut 1 3/4 inch. And I need 2 from every single color. So if it wasn't big enough, then I have a second piece. As long as I have 2 pieces from each color. And you should have plenty from what is left over. They weren't 4.5 inch, but they will get those 1 3/4 inch from it. And I just need 2 from each. The rest will just go in my string bin from the ones that I couldn't get. Oh, look at that. That did do 1 3/4. Look at that. So that one, oh, this one did not. So that and all this will go over there. Oh, I made these 1.5. What a dum-dum I am. I needed 2 of each color too. So I'm just going to go ahead and trim them all to 1.5 because I made that mess up. It doesn't really matter, honestly. It's whatever size you can get out of them. If I'm going to do 1.5, I might as well do 1.5. Not paying attention. But you can do yours 1 3/4. But if you can't get 1 3/4, 2 of them from each, then do 1.5. All right. So mine are 1 3/4 inch this one and 1.5 for these. Now I'm going to go ahead and lay this out on the wall into my desired layout, and then I will show you how to sew it together. So I'm just going to lay it out and then show you what it looks like. All right, this is the layout I chose. You can do whatever you want with your half square triangles, but this is what I did. Then I went ahead and put the matching color for this one up there, the matching color for this one up there. If you didn't cut yours to where you had a matching leftover piece, it's okay to just put whatever all, on the top and bottom. I did not put anything on the sides because I don't want it to be any longer than it already is, because this is a perfect size for a table runner. I'm going to go ahead now and piece these together by piecing each piece to these first, to the matching ones, and notice mine is touching the, black part of everything. So instead of looking like a chevron, it also kind of looks like, flying geese with little dots on the bottom. So what we're going to do is sew each piece individually first, and then I'll sew the whole row together, and then I'll add the top and bottom. Right now they're too big for what they need because I didn't know the exact size this was going to be right off the start. So let me go ahead and piece this together. And there we have project number 2, the extra projects table runner. So I matched the colors. Like I said, I ended up with the 1.5 inch, obviously, for those because you saw me made the wrong cut. Anyways, so you can do 1 3/4 or you can do 1.5 like I did. I think it still looks cool with just a 1.5 inch. So it finishes at 52, or no, sorry, 58.5 by 18.5. So that's a generous size long table runner, or like a long oval table, or just a long square table, or whatever. But it could also go as under on a dresser. It can go on a TV stand. it can go anywhere you want it because technically it doesn't have to be a table runner. It could be a dresser runner or a TV stand runner. I don't even know if there's a name for that. Anyways, now let's take a look at my second project from my Christmas quilt. And here is my second project from the Christmas one. I do have a cream on the top and bottom, but you really can't see it because it's blending into the back. But I only had enough to do the sides because I had 2 extra fat quarters for this of the Christmas prints. And then I had a third extra that's cut in here, and there's a couple that have multiple pieces. So I actually cut out 4 more half square triangles and did the 2 side borders. So I was able to get that from 2 extras, so 12, 13, 14, 15 fat quarters. And I got this much extra, but I do have a lot of scrap from the Christmas one. Anyways, there's my second one. Hope you enjoyed. And there we have it, the Giant Quilt Block Quilt. It's lovely. I love it. So, you know, when you really like a quilt block and you just want to make one, just upsize it. Have fun with it. So I honestly do not remember the name of this quilt block. It's like Echo Star or something like that. I don't know. It was just in my head, but I know it's a quilt block because I actually have made it smaller before, like in a 8-inch or 12-inch block or something like that. So I've already made this block before, just a smaller block into a quilt of sampler blocks. So if you really like a block, you could just upsize it. But I was also thinking, just listen to me for a second. I was also thinking, what if you didn't have the borders and you made 4 of these giant quilt blocks? Just make 4 of them because this is a 48-inch block without the borders. So if you made 4 of these and put them side by side and then on the bottom side by side and made a giant 4 patch, you can have a king size quilt. That's right. And bear with me again. The size that your 4 patch right here, this piece right here, is finished is actually the size of your flying geese unit. So since these were 8.5, 2 8.5s is 17 minus your 1/2 inch seam, you get 16.5 inches, which is what we cut for our flying geese unit. So technically, if you were to take a 6.5 and a 6.5 and you get 13 minus your 1/2 inch seam, you would get a 12.5 inch finished block right there. So your flying geese unit would be 12.5 inches. So you could make this in a smaller size. Just remember, you know, the finished size of your pieces right here need to be the finished or the size that this is before it's finished, unfinished. That's the word I'm looking for. You could also use a layer cake. If you want this bigger, you can take a layer cake, and instead of having a giant flying geese unit, you can actually just do this in half square triangles for these right here. You can make half square triangles and put those together to create your flying geese unit, and then it would still have that same look, but you would have a bigger quilt for a bigger, maybe a bed or something, because this is lap size. You would have a bigger quilt and you could still put it together the same way, but with 10-inch squares. So you wouldn't even have to make a flying geese unit. You would just make your half square triangles, so on and so forth. And you can make those keeping them at 10 inches if you sew directly on your center line and then sew a 1/2 inch line on the, away from that so that you can make your bonus project still. And I think, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then, yeah, you would have plenty with a layer cake because it would be 6 across by 7 down if you had a 42-piece layer cake. And this is only 6 across by 6 down. So that would work out. You just would not have enough for your borders, so you would have to add a second layer cake for that. And you would have plenty of room to do that because if you split a layer cake in half, you have 5-inch on both sides. So that would give you plenty. So 2 layer cakes would make you a bigger quilt. So just think about that. You could make this in any size. So you can shrink it down and even use 5-inch squares, which isn't very big. But 6.5 would be more like a baby size. We went with 8.5, which are 8-inch finished here. and it works out perfect. And plus you get that bonus project, so you get a table runner, and it works out great and obviously looks great. And again, I liked making this so much, I made two. So that way I'd had that example of making it in the Christmas fabrics. You don't have to do that. You could also use a actual designer's fat quarter bundle and all the fabrics are the same. Or if you have a bundle of fat quarters, but if they're large prints, it would work perfect because these are large blocks and large pieces right here. So you would see more of those prints. So that would be amazing. I curated this fat quarter bundle myself. I think it turned out great. It did make for a lovely bonus project, which matches the main project and has that same feel to it because I had added the strips down the side. I actually like this. This I might want to keep for myself, but I have like a bazillion table runners already. We'll see. Maybe I'll trade some out. I don't know. Anyways, I still have to quilt this and I still have to quilt the Christmas one. But other than that, I think they turned out amazing. And you could do this with any quilt block. Upsize your quilt blocks. So there's tons of hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of quilt blocks out there. If you can do the measurements and do the math, you can turn any quilt block into a giant quilt block quilt. You just need to be better at math than me. So I went easy. Easy. Anyways, I really, really, really hope you enjoyed today's video. I hope you enjoyed making both projects with me. And I hope you join me in my next videos in the future, because they're not right now, because I am done. Goodbye. Okay, here's my giant quilt block quilt all finished. Let me take you up and show you how it turned out. And here is the back. Here is the one I did in Christmas fabrics. Let's take a closer look. And here is